like just one giant bird.
Welcome back to Perpetual Jank Machine, the only podcast dedicated to the new technology file system. I'm John.
I'm Miles.
Miles, we're pretty good at software, aren't we? I think that we're all right. We can do the coding stuff. We can look at the software and be like, I have a rough idea of how that works.
No, mine's more like I have a rough idea of how I broke it.
That just shows that you kind of know how it works if you have a rough idea of how you broke it, right?
Sure.
Like, I know just barely enough about this system to eke out a rough inclination of how I totally messed it up.
Yeah.
Always. But sometimes when I'm using programs, a lot of the magic is just gone, you know? I remember I used to use software back in the day, and I used to not have any idea what the limits of its functionalities were. And now that I do this whole software thing for a living and for fun, I feel like I've kind of seen all there is to see, you know?
No, I don't. No, I don't know what you mean.
So if I start up a new program, right?
Yeah. Okay.
And it purports to do something cool. Like it purports to tag your images and let you sort them and store them in an album, right? Like let's say it's a scrapbooking application.
Yeah.
I kind of have a rough idea, like, okay, this thing is not going to be able to find all my pictures of birds.
Okay. Yeah.
Unless it's a really new application in the last like 5 years.
Even the photo better be just of birds, like just one giant bird.
Yeah, it better be great lighting, head-on shot of a very common species of bird, right?
And even then, you're going to be like, if you can't find that one picture of bird that you're looking for, you're going to be searching through albums that definitely should not contain birds.
And even then, even if everything goes right, if you don't look through that thing 6 times before you send it off to your grandma, you know you're going to send her a picture of a hamburger in that album, and it's going to be labeled like cardinal or something.
Yeah. No, I get what you're saying. Yeah. It does, because you other people are still optimistic. They're like, oh wow, that sounds revolutionary, and you're like, it's just something we've probably already seen with a new label slapped onto it. Yeah.
I feel like it's made me kind of cynical about new software that's come out and new advances in the field almost, because every time I see a new paper, I'm like, okay, that sounds cool, but realistically, how good is this? How fast is this? How accurate is this?
I think that's just a thing of getting older. Anything that pops up, like it's like, oh, this will cure all cancer. And then I'm like, okay, I know what this paper is going to say. It's going to say a promising new treatment that's only been tried in rats so far, or something like that.
I suppose. I mean, there are those articles about new battery technology that show up every 6 days and never pan out.
Oh, yeah. I saw one where it was like, the new battery made with glass. And then I think it was just like had silicon in it instead of like something else. Then I'm like, oh, okay. It's not literal glass, just the element silicon.
As I become more and more attuned to technology, peeking behind the curtain has it's both allowed me to interact more fully with computer applications. I obviously know how, if something isn't working, I might be able to work around it a bit better, or at least know how to get to the error message that might tell me what's wrong, especially if it's code that I don't know about or have never worked on. But at the same time, I feel like it's kind of made my mind much more attuned to this specific way of doing things, such that other workflows are so much less intuitive now. Like, for example, I was using a video editing piece of software the other day, and I've been fairly familiar with video editing software, like the nonlinear type, for a while. I used to use Sony Vegas a lot back in the day. I've opened Premiere once, and you have your timeline, you have some effects that you can stack on video clips, you have your video thing and your audio thing, but it's just so, I don't know, overwhelming compared to just being able to look at stuff in text, in a text file somewhere. I feel like if this problem were done in Emacs, like literally if I had the timeline in Emacs, I'd be able to figure it out so much more easily.
Like sometimes it's just like, I want to edit a program or something like that, or something. I want to edit something. So then I download like an editor for it. And they're like, oh, you can modify it in this, and this way. And then I'm like, I know how it works. Just give me the tools of how it actually works. Don't give me like this user-friendly nonsense. Because like I know exactly what I want to do. And I don't want to have to like try to finagle your weird tools into working the way I want it to.
I wonder do you think that's just because we work so much with software and because we're so used to this being our interface? Or do you think it's just because it's a more natural way of interfacing with things as a power user?
Probably a little bit of both. Like, you know how, if you're editing like a file, you know how that file system vaguely works. So you're like, oh, I know I can just edit this thing, but I just don't feel like opening up a notepad and scrolling like halfway through. I mean, like, a hex editor and like scrolling and trying to find what I'm trying to edit, obviously, because that would be absurd. So, but like there's no in-between tool. Like the next best tool is something that's like, okay, so you can change the color of this block. And you're like, okay, I just need to move it 3 pixels to the left. And it's like, you can move it, but in percentages. And you're like, no, I want to move it in pixels. So then you have to like break out a calculator, calculate how big your canvas is, and then like figure out, okay, the 3 pixels to the left is 0.00048.2% of this screen width or something stupid like that. Yeah.
And you've inevitably gone through 3 dialogue windows to do that as well.
Yeah. So you know that it's definitely like not what you want, but also like in being a power user, I guess it's more dependent on what you're trying to do. Like you get used to a certain thing. And, I use Vim for some reason. So then like sometimes I'm like, oh, I want to do this and I know how to do it in Vim, but I don't know how to do it in like Visual Studio. And it's just like infuriates the hell out of you or something like that. So I think it's a mix.
Yeah. It's weird because I feel like a lot of the common professional tools with GUIs and web applications lack a lot of the primitives that programmers are used to in their editors. The big one being search and replace. I use search and replace so heavily all the time, just to change names, to change some values. For example, if I have a to-do list application and for some reason I wanted to put on my to-do list to eat more cereal, and then I have a change of heart over the course of the day, and I turn that cereal thing into eating more celery or something. It's just so much easier to do it in a text editor if I put that to-do list in Emacs just to say, select all, find cereal, replace with celery. Whereas in a lot of the graphical applications, you would have to go in to-do number 1, edit to-do number 1, replace cereal with celery, and then do that for all 5 things.
Yeah, yes. Although I'm going to be honest, I avoid using find and replace just because I'm so scared I'll like accidentally replace something that I'm not, that like has a piece.
Yeah, for sure. I generally tend to be a little bit more gung-ho with my finding and replacing when I know something's going through some kind of validation step. Like I'll definitely find and replace C, but I definitely will not find and replace Python code or something like that, because I know that's just going to blow up in my face 30 minutes later when that function that I worked on finally gets called. So I also feel like having something in just a flat file kind of structure or having it all in one place is just very important to me. I don't know if this is disproportionate to what other people with other expertises might value in hiding stuff, maybe. Because let's take, for example, I'm using an SVG editor, right? And I have a gradient on one of my rectangles. It goes from orange to green because I like those colors.
Ew.
And if I'm using Inkscape, right, I can see that gradient, right? But I can't really see the details of that gradient unless I click on it and the gradient window pops up and I'm in that specific tab for the fill gradient and I have all that stuff set up, right? Like I have to be in a very specific application state to see the exact color that gradient is coming from and to which color that gradient is going, right?
Yep.
Whereas if I'm doing this in something that's a bit more code-like, it's just there. Like I can just read the file and I can see from mildly orange color to very green color or something like that. There's no statefulness, I guess. And I'm just wondering what the value is, especially in domains that honestly, I think are perfectly fine done in a text editor, right? Like a vector graphic can be really trivially opened in a text editor. It's just XML, and I almost kind of prefer to edit them that way because it's all just laid out for me right there.
You would need something to show you changes live, I think, ideally.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But
Yeah.
because otherwise it wouldn't work. Oh, I remember watching this whole video on why visual programming, like graphical programming languages, suck.
Mm-hmm.
Like, like drag and drop kind of programming languages.
Mm-hmm.
And it was all about how that's just not the way programming actually works. Like when you really think about it, it's this list of instructions.
Mm-hmm.
So the best way to edit it is with like an actual list of instructions. Like text is the best way to represent it. Like graphs seem nice and all at a high level, but whenever you actually get down to coding, it's not nice or fun.
I'm imagining that probably has a difficult time expressing very like complex interactions between things because it's not like the ones that I've used are very not dense, like an if statement will take up like a good quarter of your screen.
I mean, they're more user-friendly at the beginning whenever your programs are like simple and like everything seems nice and all of that, but it just gets a little too weird, a little too fast, I think.
I'd imagine they're also a bit more discoverable too, which is one thing that text definitely does not have over GUIs for sure.
What do you mean by discoverable?
Like, let's say that I'm using... Do you know how to show progress when you're copying stuff with DD?
No, I have no idea what you just said.
Disk Destroyer, the Unix command line tool, when you like copy ISOs over, use DD.
Oh, I haven't had to do that a lot actually. So not really.
When you're doing that, right? I'm especially picking on DD here because it uses like a really old means of command line argument provision. Like it doesn't have like a lot of the modern, I guess, niceties that you would find in something written after 2010. So there's a way to show the progress of like flashing a Linux ISO onto a flash drive. You can get the progress and how quickly it's moving and, your ETA and stuff like that. But every single time I do that, I have to look up DD show progress on Google and then copy the line of text from Stack Overflow that actually gives me that. And I think it's like status equals progress or something like that. But who's to say it's not info equals progress? Or I think there's another tool where you need to say like progress 2 to get the good one or something like that. That's what I mean by discoverability. Just by using the program, it's really hard to tell what to do or what your options are.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's more about how terrible user guides are. Or how little people care about user guides. Because once you learn it, you're like, oh, how do you not know that? You know what I'm saying? Like it becomes absurd to you that someone could be in this previous state that you were in.
Yeah, why don't you just read the 500-line manual? If you have a checkbox saying show progress, you'll know that is an option that you can check before pressing OK. But that's only really useful the first or second or third time when you're still learning it, right? All of this GUI stuff is good for people who are starting out, but I almost feel like it's to the detriment of somebody who is booting up, for example, Premiere for the 1500th time just to crank out another thing. And they have to just navigate through all of these menus and muscle memory, memorize where all the checkboxes are that you need to check and the button that you need to press and, the exact length to which you need to drag a track to crossfade it and stuff like that. Whereas I almost feel like a lot of the the delineation between people who are like good at a certain application and people who are just picking it up is just knowing where all the menus are and then knowing where the buttons are as they pop up so you can click them really quickly.
Yeah.
That's like the main measure of efficiency is like where does the OK button show up on your screen so you know where to position your mouse while it's like taking 200 milliseconds to come up.
You've got a 50-50 split between GUI and command line. And then if you press a button more than 10 times, it disappears and it tells you how to do it in the command line.
Honestly, that's an idea.
Slowly the visuals just start popping out of like the screen as you use the program more and more. And then you're only left with like that one obscure menu that you don't actually ever use. That would actually be kind of nice because then like that one time you're like, okay, so I know it's not anything I know. So it's got to be within that one obscure menu that I don't normally use. And then you could go through all of those options till you figure it out.
That is definitely an option. That is one thing I really like about Emacs is every time you go through one of the more discoverable interfaces. Like Emacs has menus everywhere, so regardless of where you do it, they always list the shortcut key to do it. Or usually you can just like type, the name of the command. And the first thing it'll show in the help document is what hotkey it is and what mode it's defined in and when you can use it. And
Yeah.
if you like manually type out a command like create buffer or something, and it's bound to a hotkey, it'll actually tell you after it runs the command, oh, by the way, you can do this by typing Control-X, Control-N or something like that, which I don't think any professional applications really do that, telling you what hotkeys are.
No, usually if you hover over a button, it'll be like, oh, this is copy and paste, parentheses, Control-C/Control-P.
That kind of like traps you if you're an intermediate, though, because if I'm an intermediate, I know what the button does, right? So I have no reason to hover over it. But it's kind of depriving that intermediate of the opportunity to learn more about how to use this program more efficiently. I think we've wound up in this world where we have a lot of these fat graphical applications, and more are being built every day. I mean, this is what most software enterprises aim to do, is put a domain into a nice, usually now a web interface, but if you come from a legacy project, a big pile of C code that'll render buttons and widgets and toolbars on your screen, especially if it's something that you wind up doing often, if it's something that people are going to be using every single day to do a job or do work that pertains to something that they're really into. Is that really the right way to go?
I think a lot of people won't spend the time to learn something if they don't think that they're going to want to.
So like the new user experience far outweighs that of the power users? Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah, I definitely think so. Like, think about Excel. A lot of people use Excel for like a lot of things. Nobody would want to do Excel stuff on a command line, even if it's more efficient. No person is going to like open up command line and then like try to figure out how to do Excel stuff on a command line just because it feels so non-user friendly. Excel's already not the most user-friendly thing.
Yeah, I'm not even sure if a command line would be a good mapping for Excel. Maybe like a malleable text user interface, maybe. Excel's kind of this weird program where I feel like Excel is almost one of like the more efficient UIs that has been developed, just because it's been so finely honed over years upon years upon years of just getting hammered at by literally everybody who's ever done business ever.
Yeah, I mean,
if that makes any sense.
Janky.
It is a little janky, but
I feel like its own programming language. Like it's really weird. People are like, "Oh, you know computer science? You can teach me how to do Excel things." I'm like, "No, actually, I can't."
I read this paper a while ago that suggested a standardized interface to allow a website or another graphical style application. For example, if you had a website that was like a hotel booking website, and you searched for hotels, right? And it showed a list of hotel bookings, prices, pictures, stuff like that. It would provide a standardized interface for you to open up an Excel sheet within your browser, right? That showed all of the data that went into that list, and then do what you would with that data as if it were an Excel sheet. And I think I thought that was a really cool idea. Nobody's ever going to implement this, mind, because this is super,
no one's
super
ever
power
going to
user.
support that. Yeah,
but
no one would ever support that.
I think that's actually a really cool idea, because when you think about it, like that website does not provide you anything that Excel would. Or if that website does provide you something that Excel might provide, it's going to be this incredibly limited in scope thing, unless you had somebody work on it for either a very long time, or you just kind of gave them the reins and didn't have a product manager talk to them for 6 weeks while they implemented it, because then they're effectively just going to implement a programming language if they're an engineer like me. But if you put it into the standardized interface, right? Like if you put it into Excel, you can do all of this crazy stuff. Like you can sort by this column that the UI designer never intended you to sort by, or you can find the minimum price for if this certain condition is true. Like if the hotel is a 3-star hotel and up, you find the minimum price where it has more than 4 pictures and it mentions the word Honduras in there. You're never going to do that in a UI, but you can in that Excel extension, because that Excel extension is going to provide all the things that Excel gives you, right?
I mean, that's just a CSV, isn't it? Isn't that just like give me all your data in a CSV?
Kind of, yeah. But this would be like a real, I guess, like a live environment. So I think they also suggested a means of like writing it back if it's like a malleable thing. Obviously, this wouldn't work for like hotel search results, but
Yeah,
if it's like
writing it back, like what?
But if you're like modifying like, a list of 5 videos that you have uploaded to YouTube and you want to change the description of one, maybe you could modify it in that Excel thing. I don't know. But I think that would be really efficient. Nobody would ever support that because it's not in keeping with your brand or anything like that. But that'd be so nice. I would love that.
So like just to download and upload as a CSV kind of function, but also it's in your browser.
And it's real time. You don't have to do this like export import thing. Like I ran into this with Anki cards. Like, so I wanted to change this convention that I was using to like disambiguate things. And my only way of doing that efficiently was to export it into a CSV and then change the CSV in a text editor using find and replace and a whole bunch of other like heuristic stuff, and then re-import it. And then make sure that, all of this specific domain stuff didn't get like trampled over when I was re-importing it, because, your Anki deck also has how recently has this card been shown? When is it going to be shown to you next? And all this like special space repetition stuff, which obviously a CSV cannot contain. Or if it were to contain it, that would be kind of difficult, and it doesn't do that. So I had to figure out how to make it not conflict with all the special stuff that the GUI program does, while also being able to make this data easily changeable in bulk. And the only way of doing that was exporting and importing and troubleshooting and wiping my deck accidentally, or loading from a backup, trying it again, doing something different, wiping my deck accidentally until eventually I got it. And I feel like if we just had a way of doing this in a standardized way, it would be so much nicer. So have you encountered any kind of roadblocks like that? Or have you thought like, this is just so unintuitive, especially for applications that are going to be used by people who are, I guess, really savvy with the domain, or really savvy with just, I guess, application usage in general, or computers in general?
Yes. It's hard for me to think of something like just off the top of my head, though. Maybe just because I haven't really done anything in a while.
Even just like dumb specialized web utilities that I just log into every once in a while. I think it'd be kind of cool if my bank webpage did that, because I could just like see if I get a statement that's like, sent to me in a PDF or via the mail or something, that's a piece of paper showing this very specific view over that data. Like, let's say I want to see what my my biggest purchase was over the last 6 months. I can't really do that with my bank statements,
Me and my gal go through our purchases and put it into a spreadsheet to budget. I think that's just a normal thing people do.
Yeah, I guess that would kind of eliminate the need to put it into a spreadsheet, because it would already be in some kind of pseudo-standard way of doing things. Like, even if it was just like a CSV export, I'd honestly be happy with that.
Yeah, I think work for the CSV export for everything, and then after that, pretty much all this stuff is just stored in like some SQL table somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's just so many applications out there that are just re-implementing a really limited version of Excel on the web. The third crypto wave is thoroughly upon us. Ethereum values are going up, and you know what that means? Everybody's buying GPUs again. We've had an extreme lack of silicon, but now it's going to get worse because the demand's going to rise even further than it already has. So
it's weird.
I've heard reports of people buying laptops now because those laptops have GPUs in them that can be used to mine. That's mildly concerning, because previously this only affected desktop cards. So I'm starting to wonder where this bottoms out. Are we going to start seeing shortages of phones after this? But I certainly hope not. And I've also seen reports of allegedly
calculators off the shelves. Students can't even prove their SATs anymore.
Yeah, somebody's gonna port an Ethereum mine to the Zilog Z80, and they're gonna be hashing it at about. I wonder if that's faster than by hand. That's probably a little bit faster than by hand, but not much. So I've seen reports of them moving crypto farms around to places where the power is cheapest, and it's starting to cause extreme demand on local power stations to the tune of like many, many hundreds of megawatts. I really just don't know what to say about this anymore. It's
reversible computing. Well, I guess that defeats the point of crypto. Never mind. I guess reversible computing definitely isn't a solution there.
We've already been through the first crypto wave. We went through the second crypto wave where everybody and their grandmother was doing an ICO, and I don't think a single large, sustainable, and thoroughly innovative startup or product has really emerged from that. At least one that's been a household name. Like, can you think of any?
I don't even know what that would look like, much less know the name of anything. Like,
I mean, half of those bloody things were like, let's take Tinder and put it on the blockchain, right?
Yeah, I think the blockchain, because nobody wants anything on the blockchain. You know what I'm saying? What would you want to be calculated on the blockchain? Out there, basically, potentially for like anyone to see it, like, obviously, like the details are usually a bit like, hidden, but you can usually infer a whole bunch of stuff just from like looking at, like records and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. You know how we ascribe a death count to various energy generation methods? How there's always a human cost to this.
Yeah.
For example, fossil fuels cause unnecessary or before their time deaths because of air pollution and other various factors. Nuclear power has caused significantly fewer deaths than fossil fuels, but probably some of the more famous ones in energy generation. Hydroelectric stuff, dams can burst. I wonder what the cost of crypto is. That's a lot of power that's being used. A lot of these are apocryphal reports. I don't think anybody's really released any solid peer-reviewed data, but if you keep seeing numbers in the hundreds of millions thrown around, you're probably not. It's probably going to be within a couple magnitudes of that, and that's a massive drain on, even optimistically, a massive drain.
Who are they taking those GPUs from? Like, probably from people who play video games. That's the main use of GPUs right now. You know what I'm saying?
This is true.
Is that really any better? Is gaming really a better use of people's silicon and power consumption? I mean, obviously it's not as intensive because they're really hammering those GPUs whenever they're doing crypto mining.
Well, I think a lot of them underclock them to draw less power because that is kind of a concern. Whereas like a gamer will just like, if they're anything like me, they'll just crank the clocks and the voltage until their power supply tells them, all right, no more, you're done.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I mean, this is causing, well, it's not causing, but we're in a huge silicon shortage right now. There's like, I keep reading articles about how various automakers are trying to tell TSMC like, hey, would you mind prioritizing us compared to other chip makers? And I mean, say what you want about infotainment chips, they're also probably not the most important things in the world, but they do actually have some use in processing things like your systems that are going to be running, driver assistance features are going to require some silicon. I mean, Tesla famously,
or even fuel injection, like, that's all done by chip now.
Yeah.
Determining how much like oxygen and fuel you need at the speed you're going for, like, all that.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that would be on a more recent node, just because that sounds like something that could easily be done on like very large ancient nodes that are cheap. But at the same time, there are good uses of silicon that produce a net positive result for humanity. Obviously, safer automobiles, scientific work, stuff like that.
I mean, it needs especially manufacturing, but I don't think that's going to go anytime soon. Then the raw products start to work with in general.
Yeah.
It's weird. You would think that, I don't know too much about the hardware aspect of like how silicon works. Like, I know it's like a semiconductor and I get all that, but like, why aren't there other things that are semiconductors, or is it literally just silicon?
Well, I think the idea is
that you can dope, obviously.
Yeah. Well, I think the idea is that even if there are other methods, we just are so good at silicon that we're going to be rocketed back to the 386 days if we try to build on anything else at the moment. Although if we do find something that is significantly better than that, obviously that's going to make somebody a lot of money.
Yeah. I don't know. I sound pretty ignorant probably to anybody who knows anything about that subject. Anyway.
Yeah, probably me too. I just really don't understand this whole pursuit of this monetary gain through crypto.
Yeah.
I understand that some people are interested in it as a technology. I respect that. Some people are interested in perhaps improving the world through that. Again, respect that. But the people who are blindly in pursuit of generating wealth by using up a resource that we're so desperate to not use at the moment, meaning fossil fuels and other unsustainable means of generating power. Even if you're in an area that uses significant amounts of green energy or nuclear energy, if you're taking away from a sustainable resource and you're drawing that magnitude of power, you got to consider who's going to make that up and how it's going to be made up, because you only have so many wind turbines out there.
Yep. Yeah. Well, someday fusion will be around and we'll figure out what the problems are with that. Anyway, no, I'm just kidding. Yeah.
And then we can ICO with clear minds and light hearts.
Hell yeah.
All right, Miles, I think that was a great discussion. Thank you very much for having this conversation with me, and I'll catch you later.
Yeah. Thanks for being on my podcast.
And that's the show. Thanks to Meydän, that's Meyda with an umlaut N, for their track The Beauty of Maths, licensed under the Creative Commons Attribution 4.0 license, which serves as our intro, outro, and interlude music. You can find more in the description of this episode. Please remember that the opinions expressed in this production may not reflect those of other participants on the show, or those of any participants' past, current, or future employers. They're also probably exaggerated a bit for comedy's sake. Anyway, thanks for tuning in.